Hello and welcome to a new episode of SportsDay Rangers. I'm John Blake.
And I'm the trusty sidekick, Evan Grant.
The Rangers are hot and the Astros are not. Texas just went 8-1 on its 9-game homestand when Houston got swept at home by the A's.
The stretch moved the Rangers into a virtual tie with Seattle for second place in the AL West and the wild card race as of Monday morning, just 4 games back of the Astros. I do need to be the bearer of bad news for 1 second and say that the Mariners have already clinched the season series against the Rangers even before Seattle and the Texas meet this weekend. So there's a little bit anticlimactic to this weekend, but not all of it.
So we're going to talk a little bit about what's changed after this incredible 8-1 homestand.
With the trade deadline looming, we'll talk to former Rangers general manager Jon Daniels, who pulled off some of the biggest deadline deals to help vault the Rangers into the postseason on what, John? 5 different occasions.
5 occasions. First week of voting of the top regular season moment in Rangers history is also wrapped up. And we're going to talk about what moments advanced into the Elite Eight later in the archives in Arlington. And a little hint, I thought the voters did a tremendous job.
SportsDay Rangers is our weekly spinoff of the Dallas Morning News SportsDay Insider podcast. You can find it in the SportsDay Insider feed, wherever it is that you consume podcasts. We've had a lot of fun with this all season, and at this point we've got a nice back catalog of interviews with former Rangers just waiting for you to take a trip down memory lane.
And remember, if you want to interact with us about the show, you can find us on X. I'm at Ranger Blake. And Evan, of course, is always at Evan_P_Grant.
You can also reach out to the Dallas Morning News on any of the paper's social media channels.
So let's get right to it. I mean, the difference from, I guess, even a week ago is pretty amazing. The Rangers are 6 over 500, matching their best record of the year. They swept series against the A's, which didn't seem that big at the time. Of course, the A's went on to win 4 in a row in Houston this weekend. And the Rangers are right back there. They're, as we talked about, they're 4 out in the West, and they're tied basically with Seattle for that third wild card spot, and have moved ahead of Tampa Bay by a significant margin, Evan. And it was quite a homestand and quite a week.
Yeah, it was, John. I thought the Rangers, I think we mentioned this last week, I thought the Rangers needed to win all 3 series on the homestand to legitimately get into the conversation about being a contender. They did that and then some. To go 8-1 on the homestand was remarkable. The one loss being a 2-1 loss to the AL Cy Young favorite, Tarik Skubal. So it was about as good a homestand as you could possibly imagine. But then when you couple it in with the other factors, with Houston really struggling with injuries now, and look back at the last 3 weeks, this team, as we sit here and record this ahead of the Angels series, the Rangers have picked up 7 games in the American League West in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. They were 11 games out when the last time they came to Anaheim. They were 11 games out. They start this series 4 games out. It has been a tremendous turnaround. We haven't mentioned that they're only a half game behind Boston, I believe, for the second wild card spot, correct? And what is it, a game and a half or 2 behind the Yankees for the top wild card spot?
Right, who are also struggling with injuries.
Yes, and who won't have Aaron Judge in all likelihood when the Yankees come here first week of August to Arlington.
So the offense, and again, Seager is playing, hitting the ball well. But I think the Braves series really it's back to what I think you saw the first 2 months of 2023, at least in a short sample, where you're getting contributions up and down the line. I mean, Josh Young has come back with a different approach. Even Wyatt Langford, who was really struggling, went 3 for 4 yesterday with that big double in the first inning. And that's, with the pitching and the defense, if you can get that kind of contribution up and down the lineup, this is going to be a tough team to beat.
Yeah, if they get average offensive contributions, then they are going to be a very, very tough team because they do lead Major League Baseball in defensive runs saved. They do lead Major League Baseball in staff ERA. They have dominated those 2 elements of the game. the offense has been woeful, and we've talked about that over and over again. And quite frankly, you look at the numbers this month, the offensive numbers don't jump out at you. They're not outstanding by any stretch, but the offense has moved the line, and it's allowed different people to contribute at different times. I will say the one thing for me that's really become obvious in July, particularly when he was out and now that he's back in, what Sam Haggerty brings to this team in a platoon role against left-handed pitchers. He is the instigator that this team needs. He's being used in the proper situation, which is against left-handed pitching, and he understands his role quite frankly, in a far better way than Leody Taveras ever did on the base pass. He is willing to take the risks and make things happen.
And I think the ninth inning on Saturday night, to me, kind of encapsulated that. A month ago, you would have said this game is over. Bottom third of the lineup, end of the lineup coming up against Braves closer Iglesias. But the Josh Young walk with one out, then you can pinch hit Haggerty. Iglesias doesn't hold guys on. He's at second base. And then I'm saying, I actually watched that game from the stands that night. I say Rangers going to win this game. And it's not and again, Sam Haggerty's right in the middle.
Yeah, and listen, you mentioned Josh Young taking a walk, and that's a big difference for Josh. And I think if there is one bigger difference for me in this offense from top to bottom, it has been in July. They have not chased as much, and they are more willing to take walks, which moves the line along, which adds pressure to pitchers and ramps up their pitch counts, and they are starting to see the effects of that. And I will also say one other thing, John. You go back this month and you look at what the Rangers have done in July, and they've had 3 walk-off losses. One in Anaheim, one in Houston, and I think they had one in San Diego too. They had 3 walk-off losses on that last road trip. Came back after each one of them and won the next night. They had the game against Atlanta where they had a 4-0 lead or 4-2 lead, and it slipped away. They trailed. They came back, as you said, in the 9th inning, tied it, and won it on a walk-off hit. And I think that game in particular, with Marcus Semien getting hit in the head in a really scary moment, staying in the game, and then getting the walk-off hit, that's the kind of win, that's the signature win that you say, okay, we're galvanizing around that, right? We talked about in 2015, this team in mid-July had that game in Houston where the benches cleared, where Jeff Bannister and A.J. Hinch got into it, and Prince Fielder was kind of in the middle of it, and that was kind of a galvanizing moment for that team. This team isn't a bench-clearing team, but I think that moment where they really saw Marcus at his best is the kind of moment that galvanizes this club as well.
And it's also the kind of game that gets the fans behind you, too, that really get the fans back, I think, believing in this team. So we'll see. Again, at home, the club goes 8-1. Now, the road has been a different story for the most part this year, Evan. So what do they need to do? Again, we're taping this before the whole road trip starts, but they've got they got to go to Toronto still. They've got to play at the Mets and at Houston. What does the team have to do on the road here in the last couple of months?
Well, I think they need to play better on the road, period. That's been a real issue for them. The 2 issues for them have been road play. I think they're 22-30 on the road, and their record against left-handed pitching. They've got to continue to do better against those. I think in the short term, look, what we've got to figure out in the next 4 days is what happens at the trade deadline. The Rangers still, I think, are very much in the market for a closer or a high leverage reliever. I think there's some interest in potentially a bat, but there are some headwinds that have to be fought here in terms of how much payroll the Rangers can actually afford to add and not go over the luxury tax threshold, and what their capital is to offer other teams in terms of trades. But I think that they have definitely moved into the ranks of they're going to add. This is not going to be 2023 when they went out and got Jordan Montgomery and Max Scherzer and overhauled the bullpen. This isn't going to be 2024 when they had to move some money to add a little bit of money, and it kind of was a net negative. I don't want to say negative, but it was a neutral, right, at the trade deadline. I do think the Rangers are going to add with the idea that they believe that they have a really good team that could be healthy down the stretch, but they're not going to mortgage the farm on anything this season.
And they're getting Jock Peterson back, which hopefully will be a positive here at the deadline. So we'll see what happens. We're about, as this podcast is posted, it'll be about 30 hours to the trading deadline. It could be kind of a fascinating time and a busy one for you, obviously.
Well, I can make one prediction. I don't believe that the Rangers will be acquiring Emmanuel Clase, who on Monday was put on Major League Baseball's ineligible list for the moment temporarily as MLB continues to widen its investigation into gambling allegations. So that was a real turn of events. It's going to impact the closer market all around because Clase was going to be a very big commodity. So I think there would be some trickle down potentially to the Rangers, but the Rangers were not going to acquire him even if he was available, and they aren't going to acquire him now that he's ineligible.
Well, at least you're on the West Coast, so the trading deadline will be a little earlier than it is when we're when the team's either on the East Coast or at home. So
well, but John, I do have an issue that only reporters and PR guys can actually empathize over. There's not a lot of flights from Orange County to Seattle. I am on the earliest flight to Seattle on Thursday morning. It leaves at 8:02 a.m. Pacific time, and it's supposed to land at 10:52 Pacific time in Seattle. Still have to go through baggage claim and get out of the airport. So I'm going to be on Wi-Fi on the plane. I'm going to be very... I know you think of me as a low-key guy, that I never get too ruffled, nothing like that, but I may be a little bit pensive all day on Thursday.
We'll talk about some of the great moments, like when the Darvish trade was, where Evan was, but we'll talk about that with our next guest, as Jon Daniels became the youngest general manager in baseball history when the Rangers promoted him to that role in 2005 at 28 years old. He held the position until 2022, leading the Rangers to their first 2 American League titles, 4 AL West championships overall. He's now a senior advisor with the Tampa Bay Rays, and he's, sure as we're speaking, going to be working hard on the Rays trade deadline. So coming up next, we'll visit with the former GM and look back at some of the biggest deadline deals in club history.
But before we get into our conversation with JD, be sure to stick around to find out which 8 moments advanced from the round of 16 in our fan vote to determine the greatest regular season moment in Rangers history. We've set up a bracket of the franchise's top regular season moments, and each week you will vote on the matchups until you crown the most iconic regular season moment in Rangers history. I've got 2 favorites here, but we'll see where it goes.
So after we finish talking to JD, Evan and I will discuss the first round of voting. And without further ado, here's Jon Daniels. Our guest on this week's episode of SportsDay Rangers really needs no introduction to Ranger fans. He ran baseball operations for the team for 17 years, from 2005 to 2022, a period in which the team won 4 American League West Division championships, advanced to 2 World Series, now serves as the senior executive advisor for the Tampa Bay Rays, and we're happy to have Jon Daniels with us. JD, thanks for joining SportsDay Rangers.
Yeah, thank you guys for the invite. Appreciate it.
So the timing, obviously, this podcast will drop the day before the trade deadline of 2025. And over the course of your tenure running a baseball operations department, this became a frenzy for media and fans, starting in June, with lists of guys that could be traded, and as social media and everything evolved, it just became kind of a frenzy. As someone running a baseball operations department and everything, how did you approach the trade deadline, and how did you try to cut out that kind of distractions that people like Evan Grant would start asking you, starting in mid-June?
Where to start? Where to start? Well, I do have to say that to be fair to Evan, who is a known nudge and would text and weigh in, try to do all that stuff. I will say, John, one of the bigger distractions, usually on deadline day, there would be a silhouette in my office doorway, and somehow you had this like unbelievable canny ability to show up at the absolute most stressful moment. And Evan, I don't know if you're aware, but John is sometimes it's not the softest, gentlest touch.
No, tell me about it.
Would be, yeah. So it's like, this high stakes moment. We're deciding, which direction we're going to go. And we've got, an hour to go. And John's like, what do we got? Any deals coming down? Anything to announce? Jesus.
2017, I remember that very well with the Yu Darvish deal.
Oh, yeah. Which I'm not sure we fully beat the deadline on that one or not. But, but to back up to your question, like I've always felt, for the most part in season, there's not a ton that the front office can do, right? I mean, it's mostly on the players and the staff, and the game's going to be played at 7:00 that night, whether you're locked in or not, or whether. The off season, I felt a lot more stress and pressure as a front office because that's when we compete. That's when if we're not going after that free agent or that trade, then Dave Dombrowski or Andrew Friedman or whoever is going to beat you to it. You kind of feel that same way at the deadline, where it's like you've got to really be on top of things. Things can move quickly. One phone call to the next, things can change with an injury or a few wins here or there for a different club. And so really felt a lot of pressure to stay on top of things. Didn't sleep a lot in the month or so leading up to it. And now it's kind of the dynamics changed a little bit with the draft. The draft used to be in the middle of June. Now it's the middle of July at the All-Star break. And so the whole, trade window gets squeezed in a little bit, and it only kind of it adds to that lifestyle stress, pressure, whatever you want to call it.
How do you I'm going back here and looking at all the trades you made at the deadline, and the text trade stands out obviously as a real landmark, but it also predated the advent of social media by about a year or two, and so I'm curious. I know what social media did to the reporting of deals and the play-by-play on the reporting of deals and how much it's cut off of my lifetime. But how did that impact how the front office conducted business when you're seeing what's on Twitter and what people are posting in real time?
Yeah, I mean, listen, in some ways it was a positive in that you almost got some idea generation out of it, right? You almost were able to, you were as reporters who do a really good job and have a good finger on the pulse in other organizations, they might put something out there on Twitter and it might give us a lead for us to, at least discuss in house, or at least, maybe pick up the phone and, hey, I'm rumor chasing here. I'm headline chasing. So you might be talking about player X, and is that accurate? So, and most often it doesn't lead anywhere, but sometimes it does.
Did it kill deals at all? Did it ever interfere with deals?
I don't remember an exact instance of that. Where I do think there was a real tangible difference was you have to be prepared for the information to get out unbelievably quick, right? I mean, the speed of when we made the Kyle Gibson trade with Philadelphia. I remember the way our offices were set up. We had this bank of TVs out there, and so you could see the TVs. CY was and Ross and Josh; these guys are in the office, and CY was negotiating that one mostly with Sam Fold at the time with Philly. And CY was literally on the phone with Sam. We had not fully agreed on the details of the trade. John was standing right there. And there's Ken Rosenthal announcing the trade as being done, and so I think knowing that the information was going to come out, literally sometimes before the deal was finished, as crazy as that sounds, we got a little bit more proactive with informing the players. Really never wanted players to find out about stuff, off social media. Probably the worst instance of that happening in my tenure was when we traded Ian Kinsler to Detroit. I was on a plane, ultimately, I think the Prince Fielder's agent, I'm guessing, probably, put that out. John Heyman reported it, and it was ugly. And Ian deserved better than that. And so learning from that was all the way back in, 2013, right?
Right, after the 13th season, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think learning from that and what a bad experience it was and how unfair that was to Ian, we got ahead of it. And so with the Gallo trade at the deadline, we traded him to New York. We pulled him out of the lineup. The deal was not done. We pulled him out of the lineup and we sat him down. We told him, hey, this deal's 90% of the way done. It's likely to get done tonight. We don't want to pull you off the field. We don't want you reading about this or walking through the clubhouse and seeing it, on headlines or something like that. So, and we had a hiccup with that deal, right? A medical issue with another player, and it ended up taking a little longer. So I'm glad we did. But that's one of the big changes. You have to anticipate stuff getting out. It doesn't mean that there's a leak in your front office or anything like that. There's just so many people that know about these things at this point, between agents and the league and the Players Association, that it's better to get out ahead of it and not let the players be surprised.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how locked down your organization is. I mean, that is the thing. Whether it's an agent or somebody in the league office or somebody in the MLBPA, there are people who are connected to the national writers, and there's so many instances. There were off-season deals this past off-season where the Rangers were completing deals, and same thing, it's being reported basically in real time.
Yeah, it's just a reality of it. And it's nobody's fault. I'm not sure if it's good or bad for the industry, but it's definitely a challenge you gotta be ready for.
So you made, again, I think I looked at all the trades over the years, and it went both ways. Clubs in contention, clubs not in contention, and sometimes you have to pivot at the last minute, right? I mean, you think you're in contention, and all of a sudden you're not. How did that work? With your scouts and going from, okay, we need to add, now we need to look more at prospects. How did you kind of manage all that? I know it was tough.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there were a few years where we were kind of late deciders. You referenced the Darvish deal in 2017. We were like kind of, sort of in the wild card mix. The team just could never really kind of get going. I think the big thing was just try to as early as you can in the process, a lot of dialogue with your counterparts to know what's possible, what's not, who might be available, who might be interested. Hey, if we decide to sell, you want to have a pretty good idea of who the teams that are going to be in on your play, because that's where you're going to send your scouts, right? You're going to focus, your pro scouting director, Mike Parnell in that instance is like, he's trying to organize your scouts and make sure they're in the right cities, seeing the right prospects, so you have fresh looks at guys. And so you're trying to understand, hey, we want to add to this team. We're hoping we have a good next couple series here. But if we don't, if our playoff odds drop dramatically, if whatever other factors come into play, we might make the following players available. In that scenario, who are you interested in? And that way we know, who's real, who's not, and you can decide where to, allocate your resources.
When you talk about getting fresh looks at somebody, two trades stand out for me, right? I mean, there were two opportunities at the deadline where it felt like you kind of swooped in almost at the last minute. The Cliff Lee deal in the middle of a bankruptcy, and the Cole Hamels deal, where it was a number of prospects going. Did you guys kind of swoop in at the last minute on those deals, or how close were you during the whole conversations?
Yeah, I think go through the two. I mean, first, the Cliff Lee deal, it was interesting in that Seattle was open to moving him early. You don't usually see players of that stature move early. Sellers usually want to let the market develop more and whatnot. And I think we pushed a little bit. I think the Yankees were pushing pretty hard. And Jack Sorensen made it clear he was open to trading him before the All-Star break. And so we'd had a lot of dialogue. Justin Smoke was always the guy that was gonna kind of win the jump ball, was gonna win the deal for us. We were really hesitant to put him in there. We drafted him in the first round, I think a year or 2 years prior. We had high expectations for him, switch hitting, power, patience, combo, first baseman, and We had a split camp. We had some guys that said put smoke in. We had a number of guys that didn't. We offered a lot of trades, a lot of offer, and quite frankly, some of the offers we made in lieu of putting smoke in would have probably been worse deals for us. So I'm glad they didn't work out. But learned a lesson there. That the Yankees actually closed the deal. The deal I think was done with them. I want to say Jesus Montero and David Adams and a couple other guys they agreed upon it, and we were crushed. We were absolutely devastated. Had lost this player, not just lost Cliff Lee, but lost him to a team that we thought we'd have to go through. The reigning champions, so we thought we'd have to go through. And I really didn't sleep that night. It was one of the first instances, also to your previous point, where Twitter came into play. And so woke up early to the degree I even slept, woke up early the next morning and saw, I want to say it was Joel Sherman was saying that there was an issue with the medicals in the deal. Turned out David Adams, a second base prospect, had something with his leg or his foot, I forget. And so we reconvened early that morning. We were talking to Nolan early that morning, and we called Seattle. I called Jack and said, "Hey, Jack, I saw this rumor. Is this accurate?" "Yeah, it's a little up in the air." I said, "Hey, if you guys are still open to it, we've reconsidered. We would put smoke in the deal." And the deal came together, that day. It happened really quick after that. On the Hamels deal, sometimes it's these deals you lay groundwork for years prior. We had tried to get Hamels several years earlier. And he ended up signing an extension that July. Like they used the trade deadline. It was either extend him or trade him, and they used the deadline to kind of get a deal. So they had extended him, but we'd done a lot of homework on him. And then when in 2015, when they were kind of rebuilding, we were on him pretty good. Ruben Amaro and I went back and forth a lot, and that was a pretty complicated deal. We put Matt Harrison in it to balance some of the money. Matt had the back injury. There were several prospects, Joey Gallo and Brinson, that we wanted to hold out of it, Mazzara, but we put, a lot of talent in the deal. Nick Williams and Eichhoff and Thompson and Alfaro and Alec Asher, I think, was in that. And we got Jake Diekman back as part of it. So it was a pretty complicated deal. There was money involved. The league had to sign off. And we were also, I think we were like 8 games back. We were under 500, right? I don't think teams were expecting us to be quote-unquote buyers, but it was a deal where we had 3 years after that with Cole. Diekman was just at the start of his run. We thought that the team was better than our record, and obviously they went on and had an unbelievable finish to the season, win the division. But both deals were, I think publicly it looked a little more like a shock than it was in-house. We were pretty focused on those guys.
And you go back to that, you sold the Hamels deal as a deal that was about this year and the future at a point in time when this club really, it still seemed like it was on the outside of the playoff race. And that has become a much more commonplace type approach for clubs now, is to say, yeah, we'd like to bet a little bit on this year, but we also want to make sure we're buying for the future because we think this club is better. Was that a really uncommon kind of way to go about things at that point in time?
Well, I think there's been some structural changes, rule changes that have led to that, right? Listen, you used to be able to get a draft pick for a player that you traded for in his free agent season. You can't do that anymore. So when we traded for Cliff Lee, we got Mark Lowe back in the deal too, but we also felt like we were going to get a draft pick, a high draft pick back, even if he walked, which is what happened. And that was the case. It used to be the case even with lesser players, right? You could offering them arbitration. Now that we have the qualifying offer, and it's you can only do that with players with a full year left. So that's changed a little bit, just in terms of that. You might have been willing to part with more for rental. Now rentals don't get a ton in return because it's exclusively, there's no tail after that. It's just about this year. I think the other thing is, maybe the bigger factor is the playoff format, right? You got so many more teams making the playoffs now that right now there's I think it's all but maybe 6 or 7 teams in all of baseball are within 4 or 5 games of a playoff spot, right? You can, with very few exceptions, you can kind of see a reasonable path to being in contention for a playoff spot for almost everybody. And so it limits the number of players that you almost have to make deals more with that in mind, because it just the supply of like quote unquote true sellers, where it's just it's major league players for young prospects. There aren't as many of those that are really obvious, especially when you talk about like players that can impact a pennant race.
It always hurt my feelings that you didn't respond to many texts after after the All-Star game. Why was that?
I thought you were on your your bi-monthly vacation. You always like to go do your foodie thing somewhere, and I don't know. I thought maybe you meant it for somebody else.
But how difficult is that, like, to handle that whole element of it's not just me, and in this market, it is a smaller market in terms of competition, but the number of texts, especially as accessible as you were, the number of texts must just pile up. And how do you manage that? Do you just say, I'm just shutting this down?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, listen, I think it was about, we could tell stories, but like I learned very early on, like you just have to be truthful, right? And truthful and respectful, I think, is the key with media. And you have personal relationships, but we all have a job to do. And I understand your job is to, uncover some things that are, quite diametrically opposed to what I need to get done. And it would be harmful to have some of this information out there. And so I felt like, I didn't want to be a jerk, but I would rather go dark on you for a little bit, or not just you, but the national guys or your competition here locally. I'd rather go dark and just not respond than I never want to say anything misleading, right? And one of the challenges too is, if you asked a point blank question, hey, are you guys in on acquiring player XYZ? Even if it was a definite no, I didn't like to respond no, because then the next time you hit on somebody that was we actually were in on, and I didn't respond, or I responded differently, you want to be a little guarded about that stuff. So I just wanted to be truthful. I wanted to be respectful, have a lot of personal relationships, over the years, kind of figured out a good working balance with you guys. And I wanted to maintain that. But at the end of the day, we have a job to do. We have a lot of people that we're responsible for. So it was the ghosting you was a result of that.
I remember I used to have to tell Evan a lot during that time, yell at him to leave you alone. I just remember that was a big thing.
Yeah.
So a couple of things here on timing, which you mentioned. The draft obviously now being at the All-Star break, 5-6 weeks later, is a factor. And the other thing is, would you be in favor of moving the trade deadline back to, say, mid-August, going back to your point about more teams being in contention and with more playoff spots available?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this, John. Listen, I haven't been privy to all the conversation here the last couple of years, so there might be some really compelling reasons. From what I've heard, read, probably more of the mindset to leave it where it is, status quo, just because I'm not really sure what how it would play out if we moved it back. On one hand, there might be more clarity with teams as far as who's in and who's out. On the flip side, there's less time for these players to make an impact, for their new clubs. And I do think there's a time. It's rare you get a player that comes in and just immediately settles in and just, like Cliff Lee did or CC Sabathia did. Like, those are the rare. I mean, CC's going as a Hall of Fame for a reason, right? Like, a lot of guys need an adjustment period. The team needs an adjustment period. And so I'd be hesitant for that. I kind of like the old system where we had the trade waivers in August, and it wasn't the most, I think it was really confusing for the fans. It was confusing for a lot of us sometimes, but it at least provided an avenue where if you had a late injury, you could backfill it, right? And
well, you picked up a lot of significant guys over the years. Jeff Francoeur was that way. Mike Napoli was after the deadline. Alex Rios, after
yeah.
Nelly Cruz got the suspension. So you did add some fairly significant players that played an impact.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, one of the more famous ones is, unfortunately for Rangers was Verlander in 2017 going to Houston, right? And so it's certainly possible. It's more rare. Manny Ramirez going to the Dodgers, right?
Well, that was at the deadline.
Manny going to the White Sox
Right.
was in August. Yeah. But yeah, I kind of like that system just because it provided an opportunity if you have a late need, an injury, or Nelly's case, that the suspension deal, that's something that catches you off guard. At least you have the ability to address your roster. But I kind of like the current date personally.
JD, play a version of a game that we played as high schoolers, but give me your favorite trade deadline deal, your least favorite trade deadline deal, and which one caused you the most personal anguish?
Oh, man. Favorite deadline deal. I mean, it's probably Cliff. It's probably the deal with Seattle there in 2010. It felt like that was us getting over the hump, right? It was us, like, to that point, 09, we were a very good team. I think in the current playoff format, we would have, we would have been in it. I think even in the previous format, before they fully expanded it, we would have made it, won 87 or 88 games. We're a good team. 2010, like, we had really started coming of age as a club, and I think going out and getting this like number one starter that could match us up with just about anybody, along with Colby and CJ and that group, like, it felt like that had, and just the energy that injected into the clubhouse. I mean, I remember being downstairs in Wash's office, and we're talking through the dynamics of the trade, and you could literally hear down the hallway, Michael and Kinsler and the guys, like, holy crap, we got Cliff Lee, and like the energy flowing through the place. And it just felt like it took us to a little bit of a different level, organizationally. So that was, then obviously he performed at just a tip top level there in the playoffs and really pitched us through the first two rounds. His game 3 against the Yankees against Pettit in old Yankee Stadium was, or I guess it was Yankee Stadium, which is unbelievable. I think one of one of the other ones that I really enjoyed was 2006. Like, we were kind of in between. I'm not really sure we should have been buyers, but we thought Carlos Lee was like a bat that could help put us over the top. The price with Doug Melvin in Milwaukee was Cordero and Mensch. And it was too hefty of a price for us to pay for just a rental, because we were kind of like sort of contenders. And so we pushed hard to get a younger player back in the deal. We ended up having to expand the deal. We put Lance Nixon and Julian Cordero, a young left-hander, and we got Nelly Cruz in the deal. And it took Nelly, 3 more years to really establish himself, but obviously ends up being, a critical part of our success and those great teams. One of the ones that I regret, 2012, and there's a couple parts of this that I dislike. One was that we're going really good again, and then Colby Lewis hurts his arm. He ended up having a torn flexor tendon, needs surgery. But we were in the middle of negotiating an extension with Colby, and I know you guys know Colby well, as well as I do. He's just like, there's nobody on this planet that doesn't love Colby Lewis and who doesn't root for Colby Lewis. And so it really stunk. I felt terrible for him that we're in the middle of negotiating this deal. He gets this injury, and then it was a big blow for us. And so trying to backfill that, we ended up acquiring Ryan Dempster. Famously or infamously, I guess, we put Kyle Hendricks in the deal, who's had a great career. I don't know if it's funny, but like the irony of that is that that's not who the Cubs wanted initially. Like, I remember talking to we agreed on Christian Villanueva. At the time, we wouldn't put Mike Olt in the deal. We put Villanueva in the deal. We had the 2 upper level third basemen, and then it was another pitcher. And it was they asked for Justin Grimm. We said no. We asked for Neil Ramirez. We said no. We asked for Luke Jackson. We said no. We asked for Cody Buckell. We said no. And I mean, with maybe 10 minutes to go before the deadline, he asked for Kyle Hendricks, and we kind of reluctantly said yes. But we felt like those other guys had better stuff than him, and obviously Kyle's made had an unbelievable career, and the professor, and he ends up a couple years later is pitching the Cubs to a World Series. But for a host of reasons, that one stings.
Personal anguish? Did one cause any personal anguish for you? Or personally toughest one?
Oh man, I don't know if you might bring up another one that I regret or anguish more, but the Darvish one was tough. And I remember as we made the deal. Yeah, man. First of all, we were still like loosely in the mix, and so I hated giving up on. I hated pulling the rug out from the team. Secondly, like I developed a really good relationship with you. Like we've stayed friendly, and I hated. It was a big transition for this guy, right? I mean, he'd already made one huge transition. Then he has surgery. It took him a while to get comfortable in Texas. Now he's going to LA and the media market and all that. We kept him pretty well apprised of everything, the whole time. So I felt good about that part. But then the return, I mean, there was reasons to like the players at the time, but it was above the line that we felt like as far as we could have held on to him and got a draft pick, but it would have been a draft pick between the second and third rounds, I think, and like we didn't think that value was great, but it was above that line, but not significantly above the line. I think looking back, our best deal probably was with Houston. In 17, like we could have had, I think, Joe Musgrove and a deal with Houston. He had some medical issues at the time. Still the deal we probably should have made, but there was a feeling internally with ownership too that like didn't love trading him, in the division to Houston. And anyhow, I looking back, I we would have been better off making the deal with Houston. We would have been better off probably holding him for the pick. But I think all those factors, the personal side of it too, knowing you and knowing what he'd been through, made that one tough.
Yeah, that was for me in terms of personal connections. That one was just difficult because I did really come to enjoy you, Darvish, and just watching him grow and what he's become as a big leaguer, the things he's done. Post Rangers, it's always going to be a great chapter having covered his first 5+ years with this organization. But I don't know why it seemed like signing Darvish and winning that bidding was such another momentum clinching move for the Rangers. And then when you had to say, okay, we're going to move on, it felt like, okay, we're entering a new chapter here.
That was a tough time too because the Hall of Fame induction was Sunday. Evan, you probably remember this. The same day Beltré got his 3,000th hit, and I'm flying back, for the trade deadline at 4:00 on Monday, and I get back there, like JD says, I probably just raced into the office there and disrupted everything. But that one really did come down to the end. And then Darvish, I remember, wanted to get the press conference out of the way before I think the Dodgers had even told their players, or before somebody hadn't been told. So if you remember, you were in Albany, but we had to do the press conference with just Darvish and the trade, and we couldn't announce the players at that point. It was after 3:00, I guess, at the time. But that one really did come down to the end.
You had, with 10 minutes to go before the deadline, you had tweeted a picture of himself in the clubhouse in his Rangers hat and tagged me on it. So
right,
there was a little personal shot there.
Yeah, it was that was a tight one. So the other one I want to just touch on quickly, I'm not going to talk a lot about how you fleeced Boston in 2007 and traded us Eric Gagne, who became like no factor in the World Series, and you did get David Murphy in that deal. So we still won the World Series, but no thanks to Eric Gagne. But in 2000,
shots fired at Eric Gagne.
Eric Gagne is a good dude.
He's a nice guy.
Well, he didn't pitch very well for the Red Sox. But in 2016, that was to me kind of the all-in. When we went out and got Carlos Beltran, we went out and got Jonathan Lucroy. What was kind of your mindset? Because, I remember we got Beltran, Lucroy. I thought, boy, our lineup is stacked here. This is a good ball club. And those
Yeah, I think yeah, no, John, I think you hit it head on. Like that was exactly what the mindset was just, let's kind of go strength on strength here, and just put together just as deep a lineup as we can. Luke Roy was kind of the, in our, we had Benji, we had Napoli. When we, at our best, we'd have these. It's such a competitive advantage when you have a two-way catcher, an offensive force. And Luke Roy was having an unbelievable year. Jonathan was, he went, and really when he first got to Texas, his first month or so, he felt like he hit a home run every day. Right. He was on fire. And so, we put like Lou Brinson went in that deal, and that was a tough one because Lou was talented dude and great person. But similar to some of the other deals where we got Diekman back with Hamels or Mark Lowe back with Cliffley, Jeremy Jeffress came back in that deal, and just felt like it gave us, again, bolster the bullpen, bolster the lineup. Carlos Gomez ends up getting released, and we pick him up as well, and just Ian Desmond had made a huge transition that year. We finally had Hamels and Darvish together, healthy. And listen, it didn't play out in the postseason. We got swept there in Toronto, but it felt like that was we had a club that was capable of doing some things. Looking back on it, and we knew at the time, our run differential wasn't great. We were winning a lot of these close one-run games, and and you can look at that as far as predictive. Hey, this team may be over its skis a little bit. But I also looked at it as the biggest factor to winning the whole thing is just getting into the tournament, right? Giving yourself a shot. And we had home field, we had Darvish and we had Hamels, and it was let's give ourselves the best possible shot. We're likely to get in. Let's bolster the club, and it ultimately didn't work out the way we'd hoped, but we just thought those players fit us really perfectly.
Yeah, that season was a great learning tool for me because I never really put a whole lot of weight into run differential or the luck factor in one-run wins. I think the team went 35-11 or 34-11, set a record for one-run wins that year, and it did, it did show up in the postseason. But to your point, this year this club has Eovaldi and DeGrom, and if they get into the playoffs with that, and they do have a positive run differential, and they do have a lot of those other things, I think this Rangers club could be very dangerous in the postseason, as opposed to in 2016 when it ran into a hot Toronto team at that point. So we're not going to get too much into the 2025 Texas Rangers with you, but I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, no doubt. There's a balance there. You want to be aware of those things. They're real indicators. But at the same time, when you have an opportunity to win, it is really hard to win in any sport, in any league. But it's when you have those opportunities in front of you, and especially, we didn't feel like we were mortgaging the future so much as trying to take advantage of an opportunity that the current team had given us.
Hey, last thing before we let you go, JD, I just, from a personal standpoint, it just seems like you are very happy in your role with Tampa Bay. Seems like you're really enjoying it and you're really enjoying your life. Do you want to be in the chair again? Do you want to run an organization again?
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't gotten asked that as much recently as I did, a couple of years ago. Listen, I think you just said, I'm genuinely in a good spot. I love the Rays. They've treated me great. Unbelievable organization. Just top to ownership through just so many good human beings. I've really enjoyed being part of it. And maybe more importantly, I've really enjoyed just being able to be husband, father, a normal person. And there are moments where I miss the action a little bit, and I'm in it. I'm aware of what's going on, and talk to our group some, but those moments are far outweighed by the actual balance. And I feel like I'm lucky. I feel like I missed 15, 20 years of my family's time, and they easily could have told me to take a hike when I came strolling back. They didn't, and I feel fortunate there. So if I had to give you a yes/no answer, I would say no. I'm not in a hurry to do that. I hope I don't have to draw any lines in the sand because I don't want to who knows what the future holds. But yeah, I'm certainly prioritizing what I've got right now.
Well, when we have this discussion and you look back on all these hours that were put in at the trade deadline, you probably do think about that some and how you weren't balanced. It was a tough balance in those days. So,
yeah, for sure, man. I mean, it's my youngest daughter was born. Her birthday is over the GM meetings. I missed her birthday number. Listen. This job has been. It's afforded me opportunities, and I've met people. I met President Bush, and just people that you never would have met otherwise, and great players, and the travel and the perks and there's so many great things about it. I don't have any regrets in that standpoint, but there is a balance, there is a cost that lifestyle wise you guys deal with too. Gina and Harriet, I don't know what they're thinking, but they still seem to like you guys. And
I don't know if my wife likes me quite as much now that I'm around more, but we'll see how that shakes out.
Yeah, she did like you a lot more when you were gone, John.
Yeah, probably. But anyway, this has been great. Just kind of going back and looking at trade deadlines over the years. We appreciate JD.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Good luck with the podcast, guys. I mean, with two beautiful faces like that, you guys can't go wrong.
We will have you on again to discuss all the idiosyncrasies of dealing with both John and me. I think that will make an exciting episode.
I will have a lot more to say in that episode.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. And when we come back on our next part of our podcast, we'll talk about the first round of 16, right, Evan, from the Dallas Morning News, Rangers' top regular season moments. Well, that was a great look back at trade deadlines with JD. I'm glad he took a shot at me and protected Evan in that first part of the interview. But without further ado, we'll move on.
He didn't have to protect me. He just ignored me at the trade deadline. You were an omnipresent force, just like a shadow in the doorway.
That was impossible. So the Archives in Arlington this week is going to feature one of the final 8 moments. And I hate to break the suspense here. We started with 16 last week, and we're down to 8. But this moment is very timely, and it will be one of the ones the listeners will have to vote on here in the Elite 8. It was July 30th, 2017. The Rangers are playing Baltimore at that point, I guess it was called Globe Life Park by 2017. Adrían Beltré with his 3,000th major league hit, the 31st player to do it, just the primary third baseman. George Brett and Wade Boggs had done it. It was a 4th-inning double off Wade Miley of the Orioles, and neither Evan and I was there. And to kind of back it up and play this out, Adrian only needed 58 hits going into this season for 3,000. We figured this was a slam dunk in May or at the latest, the very latest, early June. Because on the same day, Ivan Rodriguez was being inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. So Adrian starts the year on the DL. He's got some calf issues. He doesn't play until the end of May. And even then, he started the last week needing 11 hits. And I figured I'm great here. I can go to Cooperstown, get this done. Might hit the same day as the trade deadline. But then he goes 4 for 4 in the opener of a series against the Marlins. And then 3 for 3 on Wednesday in the third game of that series. And famously, that was the game he was ejected by Jerry Davis in the 8th inning when he moved the on-deck circle and everything. But, so he's only 4 hits. And the way it shook out, Evan, if you remember, Pudge had basically finished his speech, and Beltré gets the 3,000th hit.
Well, I do remember that, John, you do a great job with the Rangers Hall of Famers. I've been to now 3 occasions for Eric Nadell's broadcaster announcement, for Pudge and for Adrian. And the night before the actual inductions, the Rangers put on this incredible party. And so I remember being there that night and talking watching the game live because there was some thought that he might get the 3,000 on that Saturday night, and so everybody was watching and paying attention to those at bats, and it didn't happen. And then we're all monitoring it basically during the speech, and it's kind of hard to both pay attention to Pudge's speech and try to follow where Adrian was. But yeah, it was an incredible moment for the Rangers and an incredible moment in terms of timing. And as usual for you and I, we managed to miss one of the moments.
That is the only, and again, I wouldn't change a thing. I love the Hall of Fame. It was the right decision. There are people that worked for me that were furious. My photographer, Kelly Gavin, I made her come to Cooperstown, and she missed the moment. It was our second photographer that got that iconic picture of his kids running in to greet him in the infield with the team behind it. And my staff did a great job. Rich Rice and Angie Swint and the group, they did a great job because we were all in Cooperstown. And it was a poignant moment. But again, if I had to be in one place or the other, I would have gone to Cooperstown regardless. It was just amazing how it all turned out. But that is one of the moments you're going to have to vote for, and it's up against a very tough moment as well. So I'm going to let Evan at this point kind of go ahead and read the winners, if you want to, Evan.
Yeah, so
if you have those
what we've
here
got
for
here
the first
is,
round.
I don't think there were any real upsets in the first round. But you had Kenny Rogers' perfect game defeating John's very sentimental first game at the ballpark. Nolan Ryan's fight, in the fight bracket, Nolan Ryan's fight outdid Rougned Odor's fight with Jose Bautista. Josh Hamilton's 4-home run game beat the 30-run game, which, listen, Josh Hamilton's 4-home run game deserved to advance, but that was an unfortunate matchup because that was a really historic night. Nolan Ryan's 7th no-hitter beat David Clyde's debut. I think fans may be at this point in time getting a sense of a real theme here. The Rangers' first AL West title clinching that late night beat Nolan Ryan's 6th no-hitter. I think
only loss in the bracket.
Only because Nolan Ryan ended up having a 7th no-hitter.
Correct.
And the Josh Hamilton home run derby performance outdid the 1972 debut in Texas, despite all the Rangers wearing cowboy boots that night, including Ted Williams. And then Adrían Beltré advanced over Gary Matthews' catch, which was still the greatest catch I've ever seen a player make. And Nolan Ryan's 5,000th strikeout defeated the greatest underdog story in slow guys history of Benji Molina legging out a cycle in Fenway Park. And John, I'll just tell you my one observation on all of this as we look at this is, this is still Nolan Ryan's team. Nolan was
and
involved.
Josh Hamilton's.
Yeah, Nolan and
Josh.
Josh.
Right.
They appear in 5 of the 5 entries of the 8 that are in the Elite 8. And look, Nolan's arrival in Texas and the historic moments that he put together actually really for all intents and purposes, was the genesis and the beginning of this franchise. And Josh is the greatest single talent to ever lace up his cleats in Texas. It was a short period of time, but after our interview with Josh, I've had so many people come up to me and say, yeah, it brought back so many memories, and they're just embedded in my mind because he was such a sensational talent.
And certainly in Ranger history, there are players that did it way over longer periods of time than Nolan or Josh. But it's those memories about these two guys that are really iconic, and it's what people look at. So if we look at the final 8 here in the brackets, just Kenny Rogers' perfect game is going up against the Nolan Ryan Robin Ventura fight. Josh Hamilton 4-homer game goes up against the Ryan 7th no-hitter from 1991. The Rangers' first AL West title in 1996 is going up against the Josh Hamilton home run derby at the All-Star game at Yankee Stadium in 2008. And then the one that's probably going to be the toughest for me is Nolan's 5,000th strikeout in 1989 against Adrian's 3,000th hit in 2017. I mean, those are two moments that, you knew they were eventually coming. I mean, they weren't like a no-hitter or a four-homer game, but they're probably, in terms of build-up, may not have been two more individual moments in club history.
Yeah, I think that while those are probably the two greatest historic career accomplishments in Rangers history, when we're talking about career-type events, I do feel like because Beltré's 3,000th hit was one of, at that point in time, I think 20 or 21 players to join the 3,000 hit club, and Nolan is the only player to ever reach 5,000 strikeouts. I kind of think that fans are going to lean towards Nolan here. The one I'm interested in seeing is that there is one team accomplishment left in this bracket, and that is the first AL West title, and that's going to go up against Josh's home run derby performance, which technically isn't a regular season performance, but it did happen in the midst of the regular season, so we included that. I'm going to be interested to see how that one happens.
Well, Evan and I really have no say in how you guys vote, and I thought you guys did a great job in the first round. You went 8 for 8 for me. Now we'll see how it comes down here in the next round of 8. I get very confused. And then we'll go to the semifinals, and then we'll crown a winner here in about 3 weeks. And you can find the bracket now down to the Elite 8 at dallasnews.com/sports/Rangers. And voting for this round will last from now until 11:50 p.m. That's Central Daylight Time for those of you on another time zone. This coming Sunday, and we'll reveal the winners next week, getting down to the semifinals on the podcast.
Again, that bracket is at dallasnews.com/sports/Rangers. All you need to do is enter your email address, and you'll be ready to vote. You can join the vote at any stage and are eligible to vote on all and current future rounds. And remember, there are prizes involved as we continue to go into this thing.
One of those prizes apparently is going to be a tour with me.
Yeah, and the second prize is going to be 2 tours.
Breaking up. Yep. They're great tours, though.
Jon does a great job on this stuff. He really treasures the archives and the artifacts, and he really does a great job with it. It's a really intimate experience. So,
and so with that, it's time to wrap this up. So thank you for joining us at SportsDay Rangers.
Don't forget to check out more sports from the Dallas Morning News, SportsDay Insider, my podcast with columnist Kevin Sherrington, and a guest from the SportsDay staff appears in the same SportsDay Insider feed every week. Last week, we kind of opened up Cowboys camp with Calvin Watkins.
If you have any questions for us, you can ask us on X. And remember, go to dallasnews.com/sports/Rangers to vote for your favorite moment in club history. We're down to 8 moments. Voting is open now.
Thanks to Jon Daniels for joining us this week. Thanks to our producer and John Whisperer, Chris Blake. Jon and I will talk to y'all next week.